Good evening, everyone. On behalf of NDRG, we welcome you to the third day of Foundation course on disaster management organized by NDRG in collaboration with Indian Institute of Social Sciences and Sphere India. The theme for today is disaster economics. Economics is one of the most interesting member of the social sciences family as it adds the much needed logical and scientific approach to the humanities research. Economics of disaster or disaster economics assumes great importance because of several factors ranging from budgetary allocations to compensation to amount of relief and rehabilitation and so on. NDRG has always been conscious of the importance of disaster economics in the discourse of social science approach to disaster management and has always involved a specialist in the field in all its initiatives and events. Today is no different. We have a very illustrious panel to deliver on the theme. The keynote address will be delivered by none other than Sri Krishna Eswats, who graced us with his presence in the inaugural program also. Introducing the panel, Krishna S. Worth has worked in the area of disaster risk reduction and recovery for the last 25 years. Prior to joining as member NDMA, Sri Krishna worked as policy advisor, Disaster Recovery Bureau, Bureau for Police Policy and Program Support, UNDP in New York and Nairobi during 2015 to 2020. He served as the Regional Disaster Reduction Advisor, South and Southwest Asia in New Delhi from 2008 to 2014. He joined UNDP in 2007 as Early Recovery Coordinator in the Philippines. As a civil servant, Krishna Ethwas joined the Maharashtra Emergency Earthquake Rehabilitation Program in the state of Maharashtra in 1995 and implemented a large-scale earthquake recovery program during the next 4 years. He has also served as secretary to the Government of Maharashtra Relief and Rehabilitation from 2003 to 2006 and then as Secretary Rural Development and Panchayati Raj from 2006 to 2007. In course of his career, he extensively consulted for several national and international organizations in the area of disaster risk reduction and recovery. Sri Krishna has a Doctor of Science in Disaster Risk Management from the George Washington University, Washington, D.C., and has published extensively on the subject. Now introducing our very own Professor Dr. Rabindranath Bhattacharya. Rabindranath Bhattacharya is a professor and currently the head of Department of Political Science in the University of Burdwan, West Bengal, India. He received his bachelor's and master's degree in political science both from the Presidency College, Kolkata, under the aegis of University of Calcutta. He was awarded MPhil and PhD in political science from the University of Calcutta. He was awarded the Australian Government Endeavour Postdoctoral Research Fellowship 2009 and completed his postdoctoral work from University SA Adelaide, Australia. He availed the AIC Australian Studies Senior Visiting Fellowship 2007-2008 for visiting 5 universities: Curtin University, Uni SA, ANU, Monash University, and UNSW. He was appointed as Australia Awards Ambassador for the year 2014 to 2015 by the Australian High Commissioner to India. Professor Bhattacharya has been teaching courses on public administration and governance at the postgraduate level for more than 3 decades. His research area focuses on democratic governance with a special focus on poverty alleviation and disaster management across countries. He has co-edited 3 books and has authored 14 book chapters and a number of papers in both national and international journals. He has presented papers and chaired sessions in various national and international conferences, seminars, spreading over 8 countries other than India. He has successfully supervised PhD theses of 7 candidates from India and Bangladesh and acted as examiner of PhD theses of various universities within and outside India. He has also acted as expert of UPSC, SPSC, West Bengal College Service Commission, and different state universities in India in various capacities. So now, without further ado, I would like to request Professor Amita Singh, President NDRG, to kindly set the theme of the session. And over to you, Professor Amita. You're on mute, ma'am.
Very good afternoon to all participants and our very, very knowledgeable and eminent guest speakers today. Before I come to this topic, let me share with all of you that it's not easy to talk about the cost of a disaster. Every disaster every disaster is a devastation. It's emotional devastation, economic devastation, and emotion turned into economics is an explosive devastation. And most people fail out on talking on economics of disaster. I've been at JNU for 7 years, struggled hard to get some right people to talk on economics of disaster. Some I tried nurturing as much as possible within my capacities, and never satisfied. But here I came across a fantastic intellectual in NDMA, and I spoke to him, and I was so excited about having him as the speaker here, because this is the first person I came across who's actually given a very wonderful view, a comprehensive view, and a very deep view on how the cost of a disaster could be assessed. And that is the comprehensive view which most of the new centers of disaster management across the country and even outside the country are failing out to really produce, because all the science is made over this understanding. It's not science that creates an understanding, it's happening the other way. But actually, this is the platform over which the science is constructed, and that science which actually turns a public policy into a very relevant and implementable policy. The best assessment, in short, I would say, before, because I'm also very eager to hear our eminent, very knowledgeable speaker, Krishna ji. But just before that, to the speakers, to the participants who are coming from very different areas, and that is what is needed also. See, one Nepal earthquake, the GDP gross development product slipped from 5.7 to 0.8. Household consumption expenditure, 4.21 came down to 0.48. Can you believe this? This is unbelievable that such a lot of starvation deaths that followed. Unemployment and then starvation. They're eliminated. Some people, the poor, the most vulnerable are eliminated. And the percentage GDP gross domestic saving came down from 11.9, almost 12% to 5%. This is what happens after every disaster. Nepal is a small country. Imagine a situation like that in a densely populated country like India. We need to really have a very robust understanding on disaster economics. We have Krishna ji in NDMA, and I'm sure, and I'm looking forward to that this particular discipline of disaster management is taken to its ultimate destination. We are all there standing with you, and whenever needed, we are also conducting grassroots researches to bring out data. The four major data providers, databases are all in the foreign countries. Can we have one database in our country that can really provide, online support to researchers on especially disaster economics? Even, preparing a report by mass media people, those who have to communicate information from district to higher authorities, or from higher authorities to the district, they need to be very robustly trained in collecting the data. So the data center and the databases, access to the databases is also very important. If maybe you can take this forward in NDMA, with that prayer to you, I come back to you and ready to listen to you. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us and helping all of us out in deepening our understanding on disaster economics.
Thank you, Professor Amita. I request all the participants to kindly post their questions in the chat box so that they can be taken at the end of each session. I now welcome and request Shri Krishna sir to kindly deliver the keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I hope I'm audible. You can hear me.
Very well, sir. Yes, sir.
So I would start from where I left the other day, that the concept of risk is central to disaster management. risk actually, in disaster literature, risk actually refers to the impact, the actual event. When the hazard, vulnerability, exposure, they all come together, they lead to the risk event, and the risk event makes the impact. So whenever there is a risk event, there is a loss of assets, there is a loss of livelihoods, there is a loss of income. And how do we deal with this loss of assets, livelihoods, income? That's actually the essence of disaster economics. Now, whenever we refer to disaster economics, we generally refer to the macroeconomic impacts. What is the GDP decline, or what is the impact on the rate of growth, or what is the impact on inflation, balance of payments. Macroeconomic impacts are there, but equally important are microeconomic impacts. And what is very important is to understand the connection between the macroeconomic impacts and microeconomic impacts. How the macroeconomic impacts percolate to the people who are really affected, or how the microeconomic impacts actually have an impact on the national economy. So the relationship between this microeconomic impact and macroeconomic impact is very, very critical to understand how the disasters affect not just the economy, but also the peoples and the livelihood system. And you can also see it in the context of a country, how a certain region of the country is more affected than the others, or how a certain region of the country is more backward or more lagging behind compared to the others. This could very well be explained in terms of the impact of disasters. Now, there is a basic concept when we discuss the risks. It could broadly be, it is categorized as two kinds of risks. One is called idiosyncratic risks, and the other is covariate risks. And it's important to understand this, the difference between these two kinds of risks. Idiosyncratic risks are those which affect the people on a random basis. Someone gets affected by loss of a job, or there is a serious ailment, serious illness in the family, or some such thing. What covariate risk is the other, and disaster is actually a covariate risk. When an event, an incident affects a large number of people at the same time. So when there is a covariate risk, when the state and the society and the people, they try to manage it, but since everyone is affected, the risk management capacity is somewhat limited. So as opposed to the idiosyncratic risks, where say one person is affected, one family is affected, and then there is a social support system, there is a social protection system, that person or that family is easily supported or easily taken care of, the economy's potential or economy's capacity for supporting covariate risk is always limited, particularly when it is the context of a developing country. So that's why it's very, very important that to think about the risk management instruments when we are looking at the impacts of covariate risks. Now, we also now need to look at how the risks impact the different levels. There are three levels at which the risks impact us. One is, of course, the micro level, where the families or the person are affected. The second is the meso level, where the community is affected. And third is macro level, where the entire country is affected. When there is a smaller disaster, the governments can take care of it very well, or maybe the family has enough resilience, the family has the kind of coping capacity, the family has the savings to take care of itself. The family also can get some support from outsiders, can get some support from the government. So, it's much easier. When it comes to the meso level, again, community level mechanisms kick in. The community just starts supporting each other. Say, for example, you are living in a village and the village is affected by a disaster. The village comes together, they help each other. There used to be a barter system earlier. The people would, even in our societies, people would send food grains to the others. People would send food, cooked food. All kinds of societal arrangements, kick in when there is a meso level impact. But when everyone gets affected, then the community's capacity to help each other is seriously depleted. And that's where you have to have the national arrangements in place. Now, when you are looking at the national arrangements, there are three or four things that need to be taken into account. One is that what are the kind of instruments and services that the government actually employs to help people? And second is that apart from the government, who are the other actors? So it's not just the government that really becomes, the provider of the support. There are other stakeholders as well. So the government manages it with relief assistance. Then the government follows it up with the assistance for recovery. The government may also provide support for mitigation. The government may give some support for social protection. But all these kinds of support would very much depend upon, one, the kind of public provisioning that the government makes for disasters. Two, the kind of delivery mechanism that exists. And three, that the government should have the right kind of windows for supporting the people. Most of the occasions, the government provides just the relief support and then basically ask people that, they should take care of themselves in terms of recovery and reconstruction, in terms of long-term mitigation. So the government does not address the full cycle of the disaster management needs, largely because it does not have enough public provisioning. So this is one thing that we need to understand, that disaster economics actually does not just include the relief assistance, it includes the entire disaster management cycle. The second thing that also needs to, we need to understand is, in addition to the public provisioning that the government makes, there are other instruments that the government uses, or even the people use it. And these are basically three essential forms of financial assistance or financial provision. One is credit, one is savings, and one is insurance. If you want to understand disaster economics, you need to understand these three instruments very carefully: credit, savings, and instruments. Public provisioning is essentially savings. When as a family, as an individual, we are affected, we use our savings. So savings are very, very important. Now, when the government uses disaster reserves, it basically denotes savings. But the government may also borrow, and that actually means that it draws upon the sources of credit. The government borrows money from international multilateral institutions. In India also, government has gone to the World Bank on several occasions to get recovery and reconstruction programs supported. So it is actually, the credit is also a very, very important source of financing disasters. And then a very important source is insurance. Now, insurance is a function of the affordability and the diversity of the various insurance products and services. Insurance is available only when people are able to buy, people are able to afford. So insurance is essentially a function of development. The more developed societies go in for insurance, the less developed societies are not able to afford insurance. So sometimes we say that we don't have the insurance coverage, we don't have the insurance penetration, it should increase. Yes, it should increase. Our coverage should definitely expand. But at a given level of development, there is so much of insurance coverage we can have. So it's very much closely linked to the level of development. And we must understand that in a developed country, say insurance coverage will actually extend to 60%, 70% households, whereas in a developing country, it will extend to 5% or 10% households. So, and as we all grow, we increase, augment our income, we want to protect ourselves against different kinds of risks, and then we start buying insurance. So today, if we are going abroad, we would like to buy health insurance because we can afford that. We also don't want to incur a huge expenditure when we are abroad. So it's essentially a function of how much we can afford and what our understanding, our risk perceptions are. So this is also very, very important: credit, savings, and insurance. It works at the micro level, it works at the national level. Now, how the disasters affect the countries. Disasters affect the country in multiple ways, but it all depends upon the strength of the national economy. So if you are looking at a very small country, say a Fiji or Vanuatu, or even say a country like Philippines. If you have a limited, your GDP, size of GDP is limited, then a major disaster has a huge impact on the GDP. Say 10% of GDP is gone, 20% GDP is gone due to a disaster. But say if you are dealing with a large economy, something, say China and India, which have the GDP running into trillions of dollars, then a disaster does not make a large, macroeconomic impact. If you have a $2 billion disaster or a $5 billion disaster, and if you have a $3 trillion economy, then the macroeconomic impact is not much. But, and that is what, many people think that, macroeconomic impact can easily be absorbed by given the diversity and the size of the national economy. But what happens is that it affects the kind of people who have very low incomes. So whenever, even in a larger country, whenever there is a big disaster, though the national impact may not be severe, it really makes a huge impact on a certain region or a certain community. And this relationship between the macroeconomic impact, which may not be very sizable, and the microeconomic impact, which may be very, very adverse for the community that is impacted, that must be understood. I will try to explain it with the example of some of the eastern states of India. So maybe if a flood is affecting Assam or Bihar or West Bengal, maybe these are not the most developed states of India, and the GDP of these states is not very, very high. So in GDP terms, the losses would not be very high. But the people are badly affected. The people are not able to, any flood would wipe out their crops, their agricultural income, their savings. And as a result, what would happen is that the poverty in this area would deepen further and further. So when accumulation, savings and accumulation is key to growth, key to development. When the people are able to save money, when the people are able to accumulate and they build assets, only then can they break out of poverty. But if a country is, if a region, a small part of the country is under the persistent impact of disasters, then what happens that they are not able to accumulate, they are not able to save, and they are not able to break out of poverty. So even if it is not affecting in macroeconomic terms, it affects a certain region on a long-term basis. And then you have problems of regional disparity. You have a serious problem whereby those areas which are experiencing the impact of poverty on impact of floods or cyclones on a regular basis, they are not able to build purchasing power. They are not able to augment the demand. And as a result, the entire economy is depressed. If you look at the size of the economy of Bihar, Bengal, Odisha, Assam, and compare them to some of the developed states, you would realize the difference. You would realize that many of these disparities could very well be explained in terms of the risks that the people are exposed to in the disaster affected states. So the impact of disaster may not be visible on the macroeconomic variables such as GDP, such as rate of inflation, or such as the balance of trade, but it is very much there in terms of the regional, balanced regional development, the percentage of poverty, or the differences between different regions which are exposed to disasters in varying degrees. So what I'm trying to say is this, that as the economies grow, as the economies get more diversified, the governments are able to absorb the impact of disasters, but the governments are not able to protect certain communities, certain segments of population which are persistently exposed to disasters. So that's the difference between the macroeconomic impact and the microeconomic impact. And we must be able to devise different kinds of services and instruments through which the governments and all the other stakeholders should reach out to those people who are persistently exposed to disasters. Now, how should the governments reach out to these communities? And that's where the diversity of services and instruments play a very important role, that the government has been able to provide. Government should be able to provide support for relief, but it should not stop at relief. It should have the provision for supporting recovery. That the government should be able to invest in mitigation. Now, for investing in different areas, you need to have the kind of provisions. You need to have different funding windows. You need to have different programs. And disaster economics is about making this kind of a differentiated allocations, different aspects of disaster management. The most of the disaster provisioning is for a very narrow purpose, and that really does not meet the needs of the people. The second important thing is that in addition to the government, we need to bring in more and more stakeholders. I mean, the private sector, the NGOs, all of them actually bring in considerable amount of resources. So the efficiency with which multiple stakeholders could be brought in and the resources could be galvanized, we are able to deliver the assistance to the people much better. So multiplicity of instruments, multiplicity of services, multiplicity of stakeholders, very, very important. And once you have a very strong, diversified public provision, then you can leverage it for seeking assistance and seeking resources from multiple sources. You can really build risk pools, risk pools through which you can support social insurance programs. Social insurance programs would really become a very important source of support for the people. Entire Europe, if you see that, the governments are able to support the disaster affected people through the social insurance. That social insurance can be built here also. For example, MNREGS, it could also be used as a social insurance. But right now, MNREGS actually serves only the purpose of providing relief support. And it does not go beyond relief. So what is important is that the kind of support that the government provides through multiple sources should be used for rebuilding the assets and livelihoods. So the disaster economics again is about building assets and livelihoods. It is the assets and livelihoods that really hold the key to resilience, that enhances the coping capacity of the people, that really helps people to diversify their capacity to deal with risks. And the more we invest in assets and livelihoods, the more resilient societies we are. And so a very relief-centric disaster provisioning would not help us rebuild the assets and livelihoods, and therefore we need multiple instruments. So it's a very, very big subject. I have tried to provide you some kind of introduction, beginning with risks, how the people are affected by risks, how the idiosyncratic risks and covariate risks differ, how disasters actually refer to covariate risks, how the people try to manage the risks at the micro level, at the meso level, at the national level, and how the governments actually try to help the people through the public provisioning, how they can diversify their instruments and services, and how it is important, disaster economics at the national level is an evolutionary subject. How, if you look at India, it is the Finance Commission which makes the recommendations. And if you look at today and compare it to what the Finance Commission recommended in its first cycle, there is a huge difference how the disaster economics has evolved, how we are now provisioning for many things which were not there 10 years before. So the governments need to learn from its previous experiences. They need to have more and more instruments and services. And they also need to rope in the private sector for providing various kinds of support to the people. So this is, in general, the scope of disaster economics, but I would be happy to clarify if people have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We may now open the floor for any for interaction and question and answer session. Participants, if you have any question or any query for sir, kindly post them in the chat box. Sir, as you rightly talked about the public-private partnership and at the level of micro and very well, in fact, covered all the basic elements of disaster economics, starting from the micro impact and the macro impact, and very well explained how certain communities or certain regions are are having a percolating and a very permanent kind of impact on them because of disasters. I would like to ask you that how we can the provisioning, as you said, be improved, or can the provisioning include the whole idea of vulnerability? For example, gender, that women and children are more impacted by disaster. Can the provisioning provisioning include the idea of addressing different vulnerabilities during disasters, or it has to be always a very encompassing and a straitjacket formula?
So I mentioned that the public provisioning is not enough. That it should be supported by delivery mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
That it should be supported by targeting.
Mm.
That we should be able to provide access to resources for the most vulnerable communities.
Mm-hmm.
I will just give you an example. Today, we disburse relief assistance to the people, but it is only the men who get the money. Women don't get that money.
Yes.
So as a result, the women are not able to have any say in how this money should be utilized. So one of the recommendations of the Finance Commission is that we should come up with some mechanism through which women should be able to share the assistance given by the government. Women's access to assistance must be increased. So even if we are spending hundreds of crores on relief, and if 1/2 of the population is not able to get anything, we are not really targeting very well. It's very, very important that we improve our disbursement mechanism in a way that women also get access to this assistance. So this is a very, very important aspect of disaster economics. Who gets the assistance? How do they get the assistance? It's not just about, I said, the macroeconomic variables that we always hear about. It's about how the assistance is disbursed, how different communities access the assistance, and how do they utilize the assistance, even if they get the assistance. The assistance, if the assistance is used in conspicuous consumption or some immediate spent on immediate needs, they would not be able to rebuild the assets. They would not be able to improve their resilience. But if they are able to use that money with some amount of technical assistance on strengthening their house or diversifying their livelihoods or improving the financial solvency of their self-help groups, very, very important, then they will be a more resilient community. So this is something that we definitely need to keep in mind when we are discussing the economics of disasters. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
What?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Dr. Jetwani. Has there been any assessment, if at all, of the extent of assistance generated from the civil society organizations, NGOs, media houses, post a disaster? Generally find when there's a disaster, media houses, CSOs, NGOs, they come forward, and most of us do contribute. So is there a mechanism by which the government assesses the extent of such assistance, and how much will that be?
In larger disasters, yes, there is always an assessment, and generally the government coordinates the assistance. So there is a good idea how much money the NGOs are spending. I would say that it varies between 10% to 20%.
Okay.
So the NGOs and private sector are a very, very important player these days.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Can we have questions? हिंदी में पूछ सकते हैं?
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल बिल्कुल
सवाल हिंदी में भी पूछ सकते हैं, बंगाली में भी पूछ सकते हैं, बिसाइड्स अंग्रेजी. तो प्लीज आप लोग पूछिए, पार्टिसिपेंट्स आप लोग पूछिए. ऐसा ना हो कि कोई सवाल आपके दिमाग में ऐसे ही चला जाए. तो बहुत अच्छा मौका है जब आप पूछ सकते हैं. जम्मू से बड़ी एक्टिव टीम है. जम्मू के पार्टिसिपेंट्स बैठे हैं अभी क्या? मोहित, सौरभ, आर यू देयर?
शुभम
म्यूट पे ना.
I don't think
एक मेरा कंसर्न था वत्स जी कि एनडीएमए में एक छोटा सा सेल क्यों नहीं डिजास्टर इकोनॉमिक्स का खोला जाए. आप हैं वहां पर कि कम से कम जब आपका टेन्योर खत्म होगा तो 4 लोग पीछे से होंगे जो ये बात कर सकेंगे. वरना क्या होता है कि बड़ा पर्सनालिटी ड्रिवन होता है ज्यादातर डिस्कोर्स जो है, एंड व्हेन द पर्सन गोज अवे नथिंग स्टेज बैक. तो डिजास्टर इकोनॉमिक्स बहुत ही कॉम्प्लिकेटेड रूट लेता है जिसमें कि एक बड़ा ब्रह्मानिकल नॉलेज हो जाती है जो हर कोई उसको अप्रोच नहीं कर पाता है. आपने इतना सिंपल तरीके से सब चीज अप्रोच कर दी. यही जो है अप्रोच होनी चाहिए रिसर्च.
तो करीब जो 15th फाइनेंस कमीशन है, उन्होंने जो टोटल एलोकेशन किया है स्टेट्स के लिए और सेंटर के लिए, वो करीब 5 साल के लिए वो 220,000 करोड़ का है. तो और ये है कि ये अमाउंट हर साल बढ़ता जाएगा, है ना. मतलब ये 5 साल का है. अगले बार जब होगा फाइनेंस कमीशन, नई जो फाइनेंस कमीशन आएगी तो वो जो करेंगे तो वो कम से कम मुझे लगता है कि 350,000 करोड़ पर जाएगी. तो इसलिए इस बार फाइनेंस कमीशन ने एक रिकमेंडेशन ये दिया है कि हमें एक इसके लिए स्पेशल ऑफिस क्रिएट करना चाहिए. ये जो डिजास्टर इकोनॉमिक्स है ना, ये जो मैकेनिज्म है हमारा डिसबर्समेंट का, हमारे डिफरेंट फंडिंग विंडोज हैं. अभी क्या है कि उन्होंने ये सजेस्ट किया है कि जो SDRF है, State Disaster Response Fund, और NDRF है, National Disaster Response Fund. These are our mechanisms. इसमें 3 विंडोज होने चाहिए. 40% जो है वो रिलीफ की ओर जाएगा, 30% रिकवरी एंड रिकंस्ट्रक्शन की ओर जाएगा, और 10% प्रिपेयर्डनेस एंड कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग पर जाएगा. तो अब ये है कि स्टेट्स को जो पैसे खर्च करने हैं तो ये तीनों फंक्शन पर इतने 40 और 30 और 10 के हिसाब से खर्च करने हैं. फिर एक अलग नेशनल मिटिगेशन फंड है, नेशनल डिजास्टर मिटिगेशन फंड, और स्टेट डिजास्टर में वो जो बाकी का जो 20% है वो 20% मिटिगेशन पर जाएगा. तो अभी जो है सो 4 विंडोज हैं फंडिंग विंडो. तो चारों फंडिंग विंडोज का इस्तेमाल करना, बैलेंस्ड इस्तेमाल करना है. तो ये एक बहुत बड़ी जिम्मेदारी है NDRF, NDMA की और SDMA की कि हम इसको ठीक से, इसको पूरे को स्ट्रीमलाइन करें. और इसके लिए एक पूरा ऑफिस बनाने की बात है जो आपने अभी कही कि एक है ना सेल बने. तो फाइनेंस कमीशन ने वो रिकमेंडेशन किया है, हम उसकी ओर थोड़ा काम करना अब शुरू किए हैं. तो थोड़ा सा उसमें सहमति बने तो हम इस पर एक पूरा सेल तैयार करेंगे.
मुझे लगता है डॉक्टर साहब, या
एक रिलेटेड कंसर्न है कृष्णा जी कि ये जो पूरा जो मिटिगेशन फंड है जो लोकल इकोनॉमिक्स का है, स्पेशली माइक्रो लेवल पर जो है, जिस पे कि आपने एम्फसाइज भी किया है कि दैट इज जनरली लेफ्ट अनअटेंडेड
जी
डिजास्टर इकोनॉमिक्स, क्योंकि मेगा डोमिनेंट स्ट्रक्चर जो है वो मैक्रो का होता है.
जी जी.
तो उसमें एनिमल्स का बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट रोल है
जी.
हर शहर में जहाँ डिजास्टर्स होते हैं वहाँ इनकी संख्या भी बहुत ज्यादा होती है.
जी जी बिल्कुल.
और वहाँ पर जब जैसे कैटरीना के बाद वहाँ का सर्वे हुआ था,
जी जी,
देखा था कि जो फेलियर ऑफ गवर्नेंस है वो ये है कि ABC प्रोग्राम, एनिमल बर्थ कंट्रोल प्रोग्राम पे उन्होंने इन्वेस्ट ही नहीं किया था.
जी जी,
तो प्रिपेयर्डनेस में आता है.
जी जी.
क्या NDMA ABC प्रोग्राम को इसमें एब्जॉर्ब करके उसमें फंडिंग करे तो प्रिपेयर्डनेस जो है काफी बढ़िया हो सकती है सिटीज की.
वो आपने वो अटेंड किया था, एक वर्कशॉप हमने किया था जो Mr. Kem Singh had organized it.
Yeah.
So following that, we are trying to develop a program on this so that we can take more preparedness measures for animal care and protection.
Right.
So if there are people who can help us with the program development, please let us know. We would be happy to work further with them. So I mean, this concern is very, very important, and we definitely want to pursue this further.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. Very motivating. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a small question, Dr. Wirtz. Generally, when a disaster happens, there's assessment, there are aerial surveys, and you always find a mismatch between what the state assesses and what the center provides, and that becomes quite a political game. For example, when we had this problem, West Bengal, Orissa, this is more than 2,000 crores, but the central government might give just 200 crores. So who really decides, the real extent of damage, and how much should these states give in terms of recovery?
Assessment of damage and loss is a separate subject, and it is actually a lot of work has happened, and in this area. Globally also, we have developed this tool of post-disaster needs assessment. Post-disaster needs assessment has been applied to more than 50 countries, and assessments have been conducted. These assessments provide sector-wise details of both damage and loss. In India too, we have done it for Kerala and Odisha. Both you should definitely look at both the reports which are available on web, because this provides a very good picture of how the damage and loss are assessed for after a disaster, which is very different from the kind of assessment which states presents these days. That is actually a memorandum, not a a statement of damage and loss, and this is the primary purpose of submitting a memorandum is to seek assistance for recovery, for relief.
Yes.
So what you actually see is a memorandum that state submits to get more and more relief. It's not really for recovery and reconstruction. So it is not really a very detailed damage assessment. If you want, now the Finance Commission has also recommended that there should be a PDNA after every disaster.
Yes.
So that we have a complete picture of damage and loss. And now that we are also actually working in the context of climate change impact, there is also a discussion of building a database on loss and damage. So loss and damage can always be estimated only when there is a sector-wise assessment of damage and loss. So we are now moving towards conducting PDNAs after every disaster, large or small, so that we have a database of damage and loss.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shri Krishna sir, for such an enlightening session, and starting from the very basics of disaster economics and then building upon it to reach the complexities of the issue, and also addressing all our queries and questions with such kind patience. I now request Professor Rabin Bhattacharya to deliver his session on community practices for sustainable returns. Professor Rabin Bhattacharya goes a long way with us. He has been there from the very beginning when the NEPSIPEC disaster group started working on disasters, and has been part of all our research initiatives and all our innovative research practices. For example, when the disaster research group, the very agitated disaster research group in JNU, went all the way to Sundarbans and Manipur for conducting the empirical and the grassroots level research, and out of which a fascinating publication also came out of it. And Professor Rabin Bhattacharya has been at the center of all our research practices, and is also the member of NDRG. So we have a long history with Professor Rabin Bhattacharya, and now we welcome and request Professor Rabin Bhattacharya to deliver his session on community practices. Thank you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Monica, for such generous introduction. First, just a modification. Right now, I'm not the HOD. I performed the duty of HOD for 6 tenures. So let me just relax with my professorship on me. Now, today I'll be speaking on basically the disaster, low economic status people, and community action. I'll just tell a few words before I come to the point. 2 things. One is that I haven't taken up poverty. I have used the term low economic status people instead of poverty, because poverty line differs from one country to another. And also we have a separate measurement technique going by purchase parity rate and headcount ratio. And World Bank has got a separate by $1.90 per head per day. So going by that, of course, most of the, at least it will double. 40% of Indian people population will be poor people. So I'll just concentrate on low economic status rather than poverty. And second is that I'm not a professor of economics. So I did my, from the days of my postdoctoral research in ASA, I focused on community service organizations, NCGOs, community service organizations, basically NGOs. We call it NGOs, non-government organization. I call it NCGOs, non-government community, NGCOs, non-government community organizations, and their role in poverty alleviation. I worked on South Australia, but later on focused on that. But after 2013, I mean, it was Kedar disaster, 2013. Just a few days after 2013, we all the NAPSIPAC people met it that ECOWAS from Loyola. That ECOWAS was of Mr. M.C. Mehta, legendary environmental lawyer. And there, since then, under the leadership of our Professor Amita Singh, we have focused on disaster research, and already Monica has told that under the leadership of Professor Singh, DRT was first established most probably in 2014, then later it has been transformed in JNU as Special Center for Disaster Research, SCDR. And that way I studied, this is the my relation with disaster studies. And many conferences I have participated, attended chaired sessions, and followed many learned professors and learned activists who have enriched me. But third point that I must tell, that I always acted on a specific research area, that is flood, storm surge, and flood. And also, large part of my work, 4 or 5 papers came out of that in Sundarban area. So that way, there are many other disasters also, types of disasters also. So I didn't concentrate on that. But recently I have published, with my author, 3 co-author friends, we have published one book by Bruce Perry, that is Stop Predicting, Revisit Life, Lessons of COVID-19. So that way, there also food security was one of my chapters was food security. So that way, food security, livelihood, and disaster, that way I went in that. So but the basic things that I will focus here will be the same in every disaster. Maybe it's tsunami, maybe it storm surge, flood, Amphan or Aila, or it chemical disaster or forest fire. So these are the things. Before I start, I'll just want to present my paper, present my deliberation. I'm just sharing the screen. So this is the disaster low economic status people and community action. That is my presentation today. Now, this is very vital. Already you have got certain knowledge about this, but since I'll be focusing on vulnerability, so let me just go on with this. But one way you have, that's good, it would be good that you have heard the governmental viewpoint. Now we will hear the voice of civic society, that a critical viewpoint as well, that all the thing, I mean, the money that goes to the disaster, that doesn't go to the affected people. How this will be told in my presentations. Now, natural disasters, let me just talk about this natural disaster. I have taken one picture from Nepal earthquake. Natural disasters only occur when natural hazards occur in a vulnerable situation. So there is if it is an earthquake in desert, that is the next slide, I mean, next photo that I have been posted here. So you won't find any disaster. So vulnerability is the basic thing for which natural disaster occurs in any society. Now, in common parlance, vulnerability to natural hazard refers to the risk of loss of human as well as animal lives and damage of agricultural products, loss of land and damage of infrastructure, and also loss of assets. So that is in common parlance what we think about vulnerability. Now, I have given them one definition of vulnerability. The characteristics they defined, Wisner et al., they defined vulnerability as the characteristics of a person or group and their situation that influence their capacity to anticipate, cope with, resist, and recover from the impact of a natural hazard, an extreme natural event or process. It involves a combination of factors that determine the degree to which someone's life, livelihood, property, and other assets are put at risk by discrete or identifiable event in nature and society. So that way, vulnerability has a great role, major role in transforming a hazard into a disaster. Now, this is a picture diagram that I have taken from US government website, that whenever the disaster risk mingle up, I mean, whenever the natural hazard mingles up with vulnerability of a system, then risk of disaster develops. Now, how do we measure the natural hazard, the depth of natural hazard? You will get the past recurrence intervals. I mean, at Sundarbans, you will get every 2 year or 3 year, you will get Cedar, you will get Ayla, you will get Amphan, you will get Yash. So continuously, you will get recurrence intervals. The past recurrence intervals is very few years. Then future probability is very high. Every year, maybe this type of, because Bay of Bengal has a tendency of developing depression and naturally deep depression and leading to certain storm surge. Then speed of onset. In almost all cases, it is 145, 130 mile or kilometer per hour speed, the thunder speed. So naturally, the magnitude is also, many areas are completely destroyed, the plants are uprooted, the houses are, so that way it is and duration, these are duration and spatial extent, the demographic spatial extent. If you go to some areas, not to all the areas, that's why the risk of, I mean, this risk of disaster that develops, 9 blocks are there, which are completely vulnerable in Sundarban area, but in the South Chobbish Pargana, both in South Chobbish Pargana and North Chobbish Pargana. But now it will develop one Sundarban district, as Chief Minister has already described it. But this area, in these vulnerable, I'm talking about these vulnerable blocks, there are the demographic population, they remain very thickly, this is very thickly populated. And naturally, thickly populated with fat start, that lead to high vulnerability in the system. That is, and then economy, if you go by the vulnerable system, the economy, they're very, I can show you the data that but I didn't go to that. They're economically, they're very low economic people, low economic status people. They depend on maximum on collecting certain crabs from the creeks of Sundarban areas, or land use development. They do some agriculture, but that agricultural land is also in, after the storm surge, every 3 years these lands become salinated, completely submerged by saline water, and naturally this salinity in the land that makes it infertile, and they go for other places for livelihood. So these are the vulnerable system, and if you want to go to what to do, there are 4 ways that this, I mean, US government website says that you will have to develop the ability, resources, and willingness to mitigate, prepare, respond, and recover. Now, normally, normally, this is a critical point as well, but hope the government planners will not mind anything. Normally, the policy planners have very scanty knowledge in specifying the vulnerability. I mean, the vulnerability map is not done in throughout India. Vulnerability in US, I have seen in the books the vulnerability maps are done taking into consideration so many complex factors. But here there is language, there is disability factor, there is in our case also caste factor is there. So many things are there. So vulnerability mapping is not done, and language is very important also. So this leads to overgeneralization of a concrete disaster or post-disaster situation. It's thought that whatever is, it's like homogeneous, that every post-disaster situation is homogeneous. What will be flood in West Bengal, in Sundarban area, that will be in Assam, that will be in Karnataka, right now it's going on. So it's thought as completely homogeneous, which is completely wrong. And on the other hand, planning for a sustainable development that may reduce the disaster risk often remains a dream, because in almost every society, you know, the late Indira Gandhi, long back in a conference, that was a conference, the Human Environment at Stockholm in 1972, she asked the question, are not poverty and need the greatest polluters? And she very eloquently put that, I quote, how can I speak to those who live in villages and in slums about keeping the oceans, the rivers and the air clean when their own lives are contaminated at the source? Now, if I have under editorship most probably of Amitadi, that Professor Singh, I have written one paper on Mandarmani coast of West Bengal, and saw that although there is coastal zone law that within 500 meters of low tide area, there cannot be any construction. At least 100 hotels are there. And if you tell them, they will just tell that we are doing the business, we are giving poor people some employment. What is wrong in this? So poverty is the greatest polluter. That is the thing, and that is the basic thing, obstruction to the sustainable development in our country. Now, evidence, I have Sendai framework, what Sendai framework preamble tells, that evidence indicates that exposure of persons and assets, you can read that what is that the disaster vulnerability has increased, but the population in the vulnerable, the area where the disaster prone area, the population has increased more. It has been seen that steady rise in disaster related losses. Naturally, more people are going to disaster prone areas. There is the definite reason for that, because in the disaster prone areas, land is cheaper. The people, the poor people, they go there for example, at Darjeeling, in the area where is landslide prone, the higher economic people, they will never go there. But the low economic status people always go there, and whenever there is a landslide, they always become the victim. So low economic status people, they naturally become the first victims of the disaster. By low economic status, we broadly refer to some composite factors of income, occupation, and education. Though income remains here the most significant thing. So this is in terms of disaster preparedness that has been talked about in the US government website, the preparedness, impact of disaster, and in receiving aid in all areas. This the low economic status people, they remain the first victim. Now, if we go by this photo, if you take this photo, for example, that was Amphan after Amphan victim, Amphan cyclone. It happened in 21st May 2020, 20th May 2020. You can see that that is, of course, this is a school building, that is all right, or some government structure. But the background, there are certain good structures. They are not, these structures have not been destroyed, but these huts, all they were, these huts have become this rubble. These are damaged and shops have been damaged. So that way, we have seen that in case of disaster preparedness, just because these type of things, they could have done a concrete room. And after every Amphan like cyclone or Ayla or Yas, they once again rebuild the whole huts and all these things, because they don't have the money to build it in a concrete with concrete pillars. So now, if we go by this, how this low economic, socio-economic status people, some substance abuse and mental health service administration of USA, they have given one study that in many situations, people of low source may be unable to respond to official warnings about disasters. Warnings have been given, but they do not go because they don't have the money to go. You know, if you give the warning, that is not enough. Administration will have to be activated to take these people from from this vulnerable area to the shelters, the shared shelters. And Fothergill and big report on studies that found that groups including poor women, people with lower incomes, public housing residents, and women who are homeless, unemployed, and low income status lacked money and resources needed to evacuate. So they are not evacuated and they become the victims of this. Now, disaster, if we go by the things, disaster, before disaster, disaster preparedness, high cost involved, low economic people, they do not and cannot take preparation for disaster. Naturally, they continuously, Dr. Bansal told about this insurance. They don't have the money to purchase the insurance. The earthquake or flood insurance, we do. If in fact, before going out today, now I do not buy, but there was some time because I was not in an association, apartment association, so I used to buy theft insurance. So every time when I used to go outside to Kolkata, I used to buy for 3 months, 2 months, and it was heavy premium, but I remained safe. So that is not possible for this insurance is not possible for this low income people, and government cannot provide all the things for the low income people. They will provide insurance disaster insurance. That is in our country, in developing country, that is in such a populous country, it's a little bit absurd also. So naturally, the low income people become mostly homeless because 2 reasons. Highly disaster prone areas always even costly, less costly. And the nature and type of construction of the homes of low income people, that also depends upon materials of house building. They use bamboo, straws and tiles and all these things. Soil tiles and all these things. So that way they become the victims. Now, here I have quoted World Bank Group one study that that poor people receive less support after the disaster has happened. Now you think about after the disaster, what happens? Less support than the non-poor people from financial instruments, but I think it should be financial institutions, social protection schemes, and private remittances. I have seen that IFPR study 2016, when I wrote the paper on Bangladesh, a comparable case of Sundarban and Bangladesh, I have found that IFPR is saying that in Bangladesh, only like 16.6% here in Nepal, after only they got the poor people got the government support. That was in Bangladesh, it was 11% only. That poor people, they only got the government support. And rest go to the rest of the people, they go to the private institutions, and private institutions take huge interest, and private banks, all the private banks, they take huge interest on loan, and naturally it becomes a continuous effect. I mean, it's going on, this effect is going on. Now, beyond the immediate impact of after a disaster, evidence suggests that there is poverty over medium and long term, and 11% this skyrocketed from the livelihood, unemployment also skyrocketed. In my study in the Sundarban area, I saw that since the agricultural laborers, they found that their whole land becomes saline, submerged with saline water, they had to go to South India just to work as masons. So for 3-4 years, they had to work as masons whenever their own land is just going on with the saline water and remain infertile. After 4 years, it became fertile, a little fertile, then more fertile. But then once again, unfertile, and whole thing went out. So, but these things, the study World Bank Group says that impact of natural disasters on poverty is not homogeneous. It depends on local capacity. So that way, if the local capacity increases, then naturally the disaster shock will less. Now I come to the last part of the impact of disaster. In 2007, this book has been the soft doctrine, Naomi Klein. It's completely written from other side of the disaster. That book gives a chance that every disaster gives a chance to the developers. That he has quoted, just go through the book and you can find, he has given plethora of examples, that he has written this, the tsunami that cleared the shoreline like a giant bulldozer has presented developers with an undreamed opportunity, and they have moved quickly to seize it. Orugamge, he has studied in Sri Lanka after 2004. And in Orugam Bay, it was seen that hoteliers, there was a conflict between hoteliers and the fishermen. The site was obstructed by the fishermen's village. So some mysterious fire caught in the village that destroyed some huts. But later on, when the tsunami came, the whole area became washed out and government took it from the fishermen. So that way, this type of things. And the same story, if you go by Chennai flood, that November, December 2015, you can see this has been written also in the India Today and all these things, that how the area, fishermen's area, have been cleaned. Government is promising they will be given separate land, and there the planners are developing certain hotels or something like this. So this is disaster capitalism also develops during the when the aftershock of disaster goes on. Now this is the social vulnerability. If we want to develop certain capacity, social resilience to natural hazard, then what we'll have to do, that risk perception, we'll have to make the community aware of regarding the risk perception, their social vulnerability, we'll have to measure the risk communication and risk education. And of course, the government is not the only stakeholder in this area. Like Batsaji has told, that NGOs must have to come here to develop certain social capacity building regarding how to deal with the risk and risk governance, so that social resilience in the area that develops. Now, for that part, you will have to make a community engaged in the area. And here comes the community action. Community engagement and accountability is a way of working that recognizes and values community members as equal purpose. It makes sure that opinions are heard and used to design and guide our work. So that is the thing that all the people are given, because, you know, they are the first people, the community when the disaster struck, the neighborhood, whatever may be their resources, they are the first people to help others. So they will have to be aware regarding how to be engaged in this area. US Agency for International Development in 1998, you can download the CADR, I mean, some PDF is there. So I have put it there. They say that community action for disaster response, that is a part of the program for enhancement of emergency response. They say that people living in vulnerable areas suffer the effects of a disaster, and yet they also have to respond first. It is vital to respond immediately. Now, how to do these things? If you want to do the community action steps, this is these two are the photos. I can give stories since time is up. So I'll just tell two stories and how to increase the community action. The first story is this lady who told us the story that when the community responds by building local disaster awareness and helping them understand the hazards they face. So they, on the basis of second is to, on the development, assist them in taking the necessary measures to improve the situations based on their own skills, knowledge, and initiatives. This lady told us that when ILA came in 2009, so that time it came very luckily, it came at 9 a.m. in the morning. So it was huge storm. And first they did that, they just released their cattle from the ropes so that they can take their own shelters. Then they found that only shelter would be their boat, because boat, if they go inside the river, then only can they can be safe. So they went inside the boat and the boat sailed. So boat was revolving, boat was moving, but it didn't capsize. But when inside the river, they faced the, the force of the storm much less than it was on the land. So that was their community action, and they told other people also, and that way they were saved. And second is that this is Kocher Molla. This person told us that the community shelter, there was Bali 2, there was big shelters, cycle shelter, but these shelters are long way, 3 kilometers away. So if the government always develops big shelters, if the small shelters are developed, it would be helpful for the neighborhood. Now they found that they cannot go to this 3 kilometer area with their children, with their ladies. So they came to that is also a fantastic story of communal harmony. They came to the Kocher Molla, went to a concrete house of their neighborhood Hindu family, and they too gave the shelter for one month or 1.5 months. They stayed there, and after that, when the water got down and their homes were livable, they came. So these are the stories that how community action can be developed if we can make them alert. And of course, the prioritized emergency care where there are limited resources to save shelter for the injured. With this, I hope I come to the conclusion of my presentation. If there is, of course, questions, I'll be happy to answer the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Rabin Bhattacharya, for addressing the role of communities in disaster risk reduction also and in preparedness also, and also introducing several very basic concepts like vulnerabilities, hazard, risk, and also that how poverty is one of the biggest disenabler, as a matter of fact, as far as the disaster preparedness and relief work is concerned. I request participants to kindly post their questions in the chat box, or they can simply unmute themselves and ask questions if they have any.
there is a very important point that Professor Bhattacharya made today, that we could develop this further, or Professor Bhattacharya can respond to this, that indigenous wisdom, if utilized in disaster management, can actually cut down the cost of disaster management.
Right. That's true, because
how do you think, with your experience?
That's true, because this way, I mean, the lady's experience that all people should be in the boat. She told that, and the other people also came into that basically saved their lives. So their lives, they told us the incident that they were saved because they were in the boats. If they were in the house, their hearts, they would have been either with the damaged hearts, or they could have been simply thrown away. So that way, indigenous knowledge is very important, and we also, in fact, South. When I was studying this for this presentation, I saw that in South Vietnam, this coastal area has been made safe. This Patsaji was talking about NG Energy. We can take this. I mean, this the whole area, the Sundarban area, is guarded by certain plans. If these plans are if these plans can be developed by NGRAG, I mean Monrega schemes, then this flora and fauna can help this area. This eco-resource can be developed. Then the Sundarban will be much safer. And that was when we were there in the area, that knowledgeable person from the Sundarban area, he told us in the seminar, he told us that this area should be this land should be developed in Sundarban to safeguard this. And secondly, also the baths, we call it bath because dams. The dams, that also in helps. For example, the traditional knowledge is that a few days back, when I was writing another paper for encyclopedia, then I talked to my MPhil scholar. Two incidents he told, that how they, one is how they survive. That one is that in their childhood days, long back, I mean 15, 16 years back, he used to remember, he remembers that they used to get certain, whenever there is tiger in the Sundarban area, at every time there can be a tiger. So at the Ajahn, when the masjid Ajahns, they used to tell, the mullahs used to tell that don't come out of your home. There is a tiger. Tiger has been found by some person, so you should stay. There is no need of giving your to submit your prayers coming to the mosque. You do it in your at your own home. Let it be the morning fast, and all this type of thing just was told in the morning as well as at dead of night. And so people became, that was one Israel. And second, he told that if in most cases, the Kacha Bath, that saves the area. Now, they always try to think that which area should be cut first, because without damaging much land, without damaging much property, the dam should be cut a little bit, so that the whole dam, whole baths can be, either they will have to save it, but just by putting sand sacks, or just even they lie down on the bath, they said that. But when this is not done, they just cut some area which goes to the forest area. So that way, it can be the major area can be saved. So this type of traditional knowledges that can save the people, and that can be that can save the community as a whole. So
that's you know, that reminds me in Sundarbans when we asked the question to Prasanjit, the community leader.
Yes, yes.
And we said, do you have an early warning system? Because cyclones are a common thing over here. He said, we have a system better than the early warning system. And they were just hanging the canister, you know, the canister?
Yes, yes, the tina.
Call them. And they were hanging through the electric poles all over 20 kilometer diameter. And all they used to do, just pull it up at any electric pole, whoever knew it. So it didn't need a very centralized governance system to press the button. In Kerala, the most developed of the states, their early warning systems failed completely because the button was actually kept inside the office, which closed at 5 o'clock, and there was nobody attending to it. So that way, some of these things go unreported in the press. If many of these things, if actually, you know, the reporters were actually moving inside and doing in vivo research, then many of these good practices could actually come to the limelight. Otherwise, it's a very dominant idea which is always produced in the press that anything to resolve a disaster is a big technology. And for the state failing to adopt that big technology, there has been a disaster and a mega disaster. So some of these smaller practices really need to come out to the open.
Yeah.
Right.
The archived insight. I have a question, or rather, I'd like to have your observations, Dr. Bhattacharya. Generally, post-disaster trauma is the biggest issue. So I find that after every disaster, the people who die, people who lose their loved ones, they're very traumatic. But then you don't find that the governments or the communities really give much importance to this very important area of trauma management. I recall when the tsunami happened in 2004, I had gone on 400 kilometers of the coastline, and we found that, you know, even after a month, not a single psychiatrist or clinical psychologist had visited them. And children had nightmare, and at the night they would say, Tani varte, water is coming, water is coming. But why so? Why this is not an important part of disaster management? You have tracked so many disasters. Do you think it's an area which needs addressing?
This is really important because this was, I found, in fact, throughout the chapter on food security during disaster, during pandemic, COVID-19, I saw so many people, that lady started walking from Delhi. After walking for 800 kilometers, gave birth to a child, and after that was reported in the media, after 2 hours, she once again started walking, and 150 kilometers after walking, she went there. And when it was reported by the press, only then she was so traumatized, but only then the community, I mean, government came into her support, and so about that lady, that young lady who took her father to Patna, and then Trump's Ivana Trump, she told that she in fact applauded the lady. But what about the trauma? There is no mechanism. There is no mechanism. I never found any mechanism so that these people, these traumatized people, can be other than community. The community neighborhood, in fact, in case of COVID, that was also not there because they were so afraid. They thought that if these people can come to their home, they will also COVID affected. So other than neighborhood, other than family members, and other than close relatives, there is no government mechanism to provide any relief to these traumatized people, and this should be developed. Of course, that should be developed. But there are so many areas. If we tell that to develop to NDMA, they will be.
Yeah, I believe that just about 3,500 psychiatrists in this country, and post 9/11, I think 1/3 of them left for US for better career opportunities, leaving us in the dire straits. It's horrible, but it's a very important area which needs addressing, as part of DM.
Right. Absolutely.
There are no counselors even in the schools, which is mandatory in the school policy or in the university.
Yes.
Right. I think mental health is one of the most ignored as such generically also, and after the PTSD, that is post-trauma PTSD syndrome, which is one of the most frequent but very ignored aspect of disasters. In fact, I and one of my students also wrote a paper which we have not been able to publish on the mental health of frontline health workers in COVID-19. And the frontline health workers facing lots and lots of mental issues because of witnessing so much of so many deaths and everything.
In fact, I was reading in many newsrooms abroad, they're trying to make the newsrooms resilient now. Because the people who go and cover, disasters, they're also traumatized. We don't realize, we are always very critical of the media, that they're sensationalized. They're also human beings. They don't come from Mars, so they also get traumatized. They get, very affected by the blood, gore, and the devastation which they see. So some newsrooms are now addressing this issue for journalists even.
In Fukushima, 2011, the newsrooms had got washed away.
Yes, imagine. Yes. Then who is going to cover? So participants are very passive. Why?
Yes, we also on behalf of NDRG would like to.
Yeah, guys, wake up.
I mean, they're very knowledgeable persons. I have gone through some of the profiles of the participants and found that they're highly knowledgeable. So, but why they are not? I want to also learn from their experience. Some working in NDMA, some other places. So why they are not giving us the enlightenment, I do not know. They should also.
We can ask them to actually switch on their video for a while so that actually we can see their faces.
Take a photo also. In any case, we need that for certificate provisions also. We need a photograph at the end of every lecture.
Yes, like attendance sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they can, okay. If they can switch on their video.
Also, the participants need to be with us throughout for 2 hours, because we observe that they keep leaving and then rejoining, keep leaving and rejoining. I think that is also not going to work. You have to be with us for continuously for 2 hours.
It could also be Wi-Fi issue also sometimes, Monica. That get disconnected, then you disconnect, then you come again.
We have participants from so many states. Actually, local context keep certain local contexts are just raised. That how disasters in their area made the havoc. Then also you can learn some things. So that way.
Can we have the photo now?
Mr. Sanjay Kumar Gautam has joined us from Delhi Transco. He is actually manager at Delhi Transco right now.
Please, Sanjay Kumar ji, आप थोड़ा बोलिए कि कैसे ट्रांसपोर्ट आप डिजास्टर में आप कैसे प्रोवाइड करते, क्या हेल्प करते, कैसे? If you just tell us. आप थोड़ा तो बोलिए. No, you are on mute.
Unmute.
Unmute, please.
Sir, what are you saying?
If you can just enlighten us regarding the role of transport during disaster, that's very important role. I mean, I have found, I can tell you one incident. After that, you just please enlighten us.
Rabin, it's an electricity company.
But no,
it sounds like transport kind of a thing. But
no.
It's
electricity.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like transport. I also got confused initially.
Transport.
Sir, basically we are.
How do you manage the grid during a disaster?
Sir, basically we are dealing with the power sector. I mean, Transco company. In this Transco, your lectures are your advice such that more connected with the administrative or public sectors, and we are dealing with electricity, I mean transmission company, or in this company there is a phenomena of using upgradation of technology or other things to improve to tackle with the disaster situations.
I have got just one question. In most cases of disaster, we find that in city disaster like Madras, Chennai, we found that there was blackout. I mean, power went out.
Yes.
So after what do you do that time? I mean, it's true that if power is there, there may be some disaster also. People may be electrocuted. But
I got electrocuted yesterday in Bangalore.
Basically, there is a system for controlling the flow of energy of electricity, and that system governs the how monitor, how operate, how connecting to load of different areas. There is a system in state level or regional level, and that system controls the flow of power of the electricity.
Achha.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Sanjay sir, for your response.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions or queries to address?
Rahul Kumar ji is there. Madhav Sharma ji is also there. You can see their faces. If they just give some interaction, that would be great. आप थोड़ा तो बोलिए, कुछ तो बोलिए.
शक्ल दिखा दीजिए.
Hello, sir.
Please.
Yes, I'm working on disaster management. I am a PhD scholar in Central University of Jammu. Ma'am, no, my guide is Dr. Mohit Sharma. So you came there in CR Jammu on last, I think 10th of August. So I was not there due to some personal work. So I'm working on landslide in Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, as well as in Jammu Kashmir. So particularly in the Himalayan region, there is frequently incidents of landslide.
Landslide in Jammu or in Kashmir?
Kashmir highway.
Jammu Kashmir. And Himachal Pradesh, as well as in Uttarakhand. So initially, I just started about 6 months before, and I'm framing my research or synopsis. So getting idea about what is disaster and landslide and all that. So I'm in initial phase. I'm trying to understand, and that's why I joined this course to get basic ideas about disaster management and legal process and legal international framework as well as national and regional frameworks. So I can say this only at this moment.
ठीक लग रहा है आपको? फाउंडेशन कोर्स के बारे में आपको कुछ कहना है, कुछ उसमें एडिशन करना चाहेंगे, कोई उसका व्यू आपको उसमें इम्प्रूवमेंट करना चाहेंगे कि आपकी रिक्वायरमेंट्स को पूरा करे, कुछ ऐसा आपको कुछ बताना है, शेयर करना है कुछ?
मैं चाहूंगा कि इस पे मुझे लिटरेचर और मतलब मिले आपकी तरफ से भी और मतलब फाउंडेशन कोर्स की ओर से, तो वो मेरे लिए और ज्यादा हेल्पफुल रहेगा.
So that we can provide, of course we can provide.
Yes.
All the presentations.
The presentation. that we can, of course, we should do.
Yes, the presentation was very helpful and legal framework.
That we can do. Any other suggestions from Shubham Sharma or Saima ji?
Good evening, everyone. I'm also a PhD student in the Department of Public Policy and Public Administration from Central University, Jammu, sir.
Oh.
So I enrolled in the department recently. So it's been 6 months, and I'm also planning to pursue my research in the field of disaster.
Achha. So field of disaster, public policy, develop policies in the field of disaster. That is your basic focus.
My basic focus will be, sir, community resilience in Jammu and Kashmir.
Good, very good.
Role of community resilience in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and we have a number of districts here which are very vulnerable to disaster, especially landslides. District Ramban, Udhampur, Doda, even Jammu also, sir. So communities, the role of community is very crucial when we see these huge destructions which took place on and on day-to-day basis. And no such mechanism has been created in the state of Jammu and Kashmir to deal with these kind of vulnerabilities.
But are there any programs? Are there any programs in Jammu and Kashmir to make the communities resilient, or how does it trickle down the government's programs? Are there any programs with the local government or the state government to make the communities resilient? There has to be a way.
There are. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. There are some district disaster management plans, and even these district disaster management plans are not working effectively.
Okay.
Most of the places, especially a region like Udhampur district, Ramban district, is very strategically important for Jammu province because it connects entire Kashmir province with the rest of the world. And no such mechanism has been created to deal with disaster, and even it hasn't reflected in their district disaster management plans.
I mean, district disaster management plan, district disaster management department, they work or not? That is the basic question. Government departments exist, but in most cases, they just remain in the websites.
They wait for a disaster to happen, then they get activated.
They get activated.
Especially in state of Jammu and Kashmir, instead of disaster management, they are more focusing on management of disaster.
Right. That is the basic thing I didn't tell. But after Amphan that happened, I mean, 2,000 crores of rupees that went away. So,
yes.
That was the observation of CAG, that was the observation of High Court, and then the money refund, and then also the irregularities. But anyway, we will have to copy it up. Saima ji, if you have anything, please tell us.
Very good evening, sir, and such a pleasure when we have the resource person directly interacting with all the participants. So it is a very nice experience indeed. I am from communication background. I have my final submission of PhD scheduled either this month or the next month. So I am completely from mass communication background. But as it is said, the disaster is not exclusive. It is inclusive of all the sciences, social sciences, of all the different courses. So that is what I heard from direct horse's mouth in all these lectures that we have had, that disaster can impact anybody, and especially being a communication person, we should know how exactly we need to communicate when something is happening, or even before that, like you are doing right now in this disaster management course, you're communicating how to manage a disaster so that we all are prepared. So it is indeed a pleasure to be a part of this course, and I have been learning a lot. Thank you so much.
Which university you come from, Saima?
Ma'am, I am from Amity University.
You're from Amity, wonderful.
Yeah.
Tomorrow we are devoting the whole day on communication and mass media.
Absolutely. That is
what to have your participation in that, yeah.
Yeah, my thesis is on, ma'am, role of social media in the lives of women cancer survivor. So,
okay.
Yeah. So even social media is a very important tool how we can tackle disasters. So
absolutely, absolutely. And
very important.
Cancer survivors, yes.
If tomorrow, because social media has saved so many lives. In fact, there has been damage and people are below the ruins, rubbles. And from there, just because
it goes viral and
phone, people have been saved. Yes, please.
In the current example of pandemic, sir, in COVID-19, people, even if the government agencies failed, it was social media that was working and saving lives of people. When oxygen was not there, when food supplies failed, there were dead bodies in houses of people. It was just a click of a picture which went viral and there were people helped each other.
And what Dr. Vaz said, even 10 to 20% help coming from the civil society is a huge amount. Imagine it runs into thousands of crores, which is really good. That's what he said.
Absolutely, ma'am. Absolutely.
Wonderful. So every day we must have this kind of a chat at the end of the day.
Absolutely. This is encouraging.
Yes.
Since we have got 5 minutes more, Madhavji, if you have some suggestions, if you please tell us.
The argumentative Indian only comes from Bengal.
Good evening to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Sir for having this wonderful session. So basically, what I have experienced the most amongst the natural disasters is landslides, because I have traveled a lot extensively in the mountain regions, be it Jammu and Kashmir or Himachal or even Uttarakhand. So what I have experienced the most are the landslides, and they people are actually, what I have noticed is that other than the local people who are just living around the highly sensitive landslide areas, other than that, the normal other people are coming from, places like Delhi NCR or, other places as well, coming from Punjab and going towards these kind of hill stations. They are not sensitized enough and that how to react or how to prevent these kind of disasters, or when the landslide happens, how we can actually protect the people around, and how we can get the medical services as soon as possible. So this is one of my major concerns, that actually sometimes I have read a lot of things, but still I don't get that the people or local people also don't get that particular training or something like that for how to tackle the landslides basically. So this is my genuine.
You are from which state?
I am from Delhi.
Delhi.
Yeah.
But you traveled a lot. I mean.
Yeah. Traveled a lot. Yeah. So this is like what my that's one of the major concerns that I always feel, that we should definitely get something. I'm from the again from the mass communication and production background, so we make a lot of videos, a lot of films. So one of my future goal is that if we can make something out of it, something to educate the people. Because many of the local people are not that much literate. They are not able to read or write, but if they can see some from audio visual medium or some videos which can help them to focus more on how to react during the landslide situations. So that's my major concern. That's the thing.
And also how to safeguard, because landslides happen because these mountains are still in the process of making their loose, because we are doing a lot of deforestation. If they start planting the trees and all, there could be many, small little things which could be told to the communities to, do on their own, So I've seen that most of these landslides happen because of that stupid kind of development which happens all over the mountainous area, We change the courses of rivers. We dig the mountains to make room for the residential colonies and for the hydroelectric projects. We don't realize that when we play with nature, nature plays back with us.
Correct.
There's a whole science behind it. But then somebody talked about, you talked about the native intelligence. There are a lot of things, the local guys would know, which can be incorporated in the videos which you can, which you have in mind to make. So that's very interesting proposal. And maybe we could talk further on that. Very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you everybody and all our participants for such a lively interaction. I think we had a fantastic session today on disaster economics with our keynote speaker, Shri Krishna Vatsar, delivering on very basic concepts and also highlighting the role of public-private partnership. He kept on speaking that government plus other actors, other stakeholders. And from there, we went on to our other session on community and capacity building, wherein this particular whole idea of other actors and stakeholders was also addressed, that how communities can help each other, and the indigenous knowledge can help in mitigating and also addressing the economics of disaster. That is how the cost of mitigation can be reduced by including communities in the disaster management and disaster governance. And also how the 15th Finance Commission, as Krishna sir rightly said, is also addressing the whole issue of vulnerabilities during disasters, with which Professor Rabin Bhattacharya started by defining what do we mean by vulnerabilities. And in the vulnerabilities, he highlighted the vulnerability of economics, that is poverty, that how poor people are more vulnerable to the impact of disasters. And finally, how Professor Ramita Singh asked for a spatial database as far as the disaster economics is concerned. I think today we had a fantastic session which covered all the aspects of disaster economics and also introduced all the basic concepts of disaster economics like hazard, risk, vulnerability, credit, saving, insurance, and the multiple window system for the government to work. And the government cannot work alone as far as relief, rehabilitation, and mitigation is concerned. So the communities has to come together with government, and we have to join hands. And as Krishna sir correctly has said, that the NGOs or the community leaders, which in the same space NDRG sees itself, so how we can also work together with government to working towards the disaster relief, rehabilitation, and mitigation. On behalf of NDRG, we thank Shri Krishna sir for taking out time from his busy schedule. We thank Professor Rabin Bhattacharya for giving such an enlightening session and also interacting with all our participants in such a lively fashion. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all participants for being with us, and we request your continuous presence for 2 hours from tomorrow. And tomorrow we have a very important session which will be spearheaded by Professor Jayashree Jethavani on media, and nobody can miss that. Thank you.
Mass media is nothing without interaction and network.
Yes. And I would like to end on a lighter note that spending 7 to 8 years in New Delhi, I always get to know about the earthquake in New Delhi through social media, because I don't know why I'm not able to feel earthquakes which are low on Richter scale. So it was always Facebook telling and friends posting about earthquakes in JNU. So yeah, so nobody can rule out the importance of media from our lives.
See you all tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.